Zettel für die lange Weg. 2 Flaschen Whisky für die Zeit. Und ich date gern habe, du bist dabei. Mario geht fort mal weg, ist weit. Wann ich geh, ich werd dir fehlen, wann ich geh. Du sagst nicht, was ich mach, du sagst nicht, wie ich lach. Ich werd dir fehlen, du watsch sehen. Hab kriegt mein Zettel für den langen Weg. Du schönste, als mir finden kann. Es hat Mario und Dale ganz wunderbar. Hass ich dir den weißen Dank. Wann ich geh, ich werd dir fehlen, wann ich geh. Du sagst nicht, was ich mach, du sagst nicht, wie ich lach. Ich werd dir fehlen, du watch sehen. Well, Gouda Obit Liebe Lied. Welcome back to another episode of PA Dutch Live. We are now in the month of February, or as we say in Pennsylvania Dutch, Hanning. Can you believe it? Already 2 months in to this new year, 2022. If this is the first time you are joining us, I would just like to say, welcome, and you are in for a treat tonight. If you've been joining us every month, like I know a lot of you have, well, welcome back, welcome zurück, as we say in Pennsylvania Dutch, and it's great to have everybody with us. You know the drill. If you've watched before, throw in the comment section wherever you are. If you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook, we're broadcasting live to Twitter tonight as well. So if you're watching there, put in the comment section. Let me know where you are streaming in from. Of course, I'm here in the beautiful studios of Singing Dutchman Productions in lovely Howard, Pennsylvania, out in Center County. We got people joining us already, throwing in some comments, letting us know where they're from. I love to give people shout outs. Our good friend Chris, he's down there in Southeast PA. He's saying, hi, Doug. He was so excited to say hi. He said it twice. I just know how Chris is. He gets so excited and ahead of himself. Why sometimes he has to slow down a little bit, right? Our good friend is once again staying up midnight in Germany, joining us. Norman, gute Maria aus Steinbach am Glan im Arich, stormige alte Land, in stormy old country. Well, Norman, I hope the storms aren't too bad and the weather turns out to be nice here in the next couple hours. But Gross Dunk, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We got David. He joins us almost every month from beautiful Lehigh County, Pennsylvania. Chris is joining us once again from Wilmington, North Carolina, there on the coast of eastern North Carolina. Dolly, she's been joining us every month as well. Hello from You Bet Beautiful Berks County, the beautifulest county in Pennsylvania. Is beautifulest a word? I just made it. Shainsta, we could say in Pennsylvania Dutch. It's easier than English, right? Yvonne is joining us again from Easton. That's 2 from Lehigh County out that way. Jody's joining us from Baltimore, Maryland. Jody, thanks for joining us. Eric is checking in from Bucks County. Oh, there's our good friend Carol, joining us from beautiful downtown Burnville. She joins us every month. Carol, we've been following along. We're passing along our thoughts and prayers with you as you and your husband are battling some health issues. We are hoping that things turn for the good here very soon and that we can get back to life as normal in Burnville there. Hunter is joining us from Boyerstädtel. I think he knows our guest this evening pretty darn well. Scott's joining us from Penn Argyll there in Northampton County. Scott's a good guy. I've been Facebook friends with him for a while. He's got a pretty cool story. Maybe we can get him on this show sometime and talk about that. Our good friend Adam Kissinger is joining us. Oh, from my home, well, almost my hometown, the little town right down the road from my hometown, Mooresville, Pennsylvania. Little known fact, I was a little league player when little Dougie was playing sports, and I played for the Mooresville Pirates. Adam, shout out to you. Adam has this great thing on social media called Rad Scrapple. Look it up. There's tons of great content out there that they're putting out, videos, music. It's a little different, but different is good. Check out Rad Scrapple. Adam, thanks for joining us again. David is checking in from Boyertown as well, waving his hand. Well, I just love that everybody's here. If you're joining, and as you join, of course, to let us know where you're calling in from, not calling in, where you're joining us from. I love to know where all these people, as we're out there in internet land, where we're all sitting behind a screen and somehow magically with the magic of the internet, we're all coming together. What a wonderful show we have tonight. We have a good friend making her return trip to PA Dutch Live. But we have a couple things as I always like to start the show with some upcoming events, things like that, some news to share with all of you. So let's jump right in. And okay, I'm going to spill the beans, but most of you probably know. We're going to welcome on Rachel Yoder here in a couple minutes, but not just yet. And then it's all things kitsch tonight. Oh, we got someone joining us from New Oxford, Pennsylvania. Sandra, thanks for joining in. A couple of announcements for everybody out there in Pennsylvania Dutch land. If you are still interested in learning some Pennsylvania Dutch, our good friend Luella is still teaching the courses at Lehigh Carbon Community College. And the level 1 class is currently taking place running through March. But then there's a level 2 starting up in April, as you can see there, from April 21st into June. If you've already completed the level 1 course, maybe you want to move on to level 2, here's an opportunity for you. Just check out and Google search Lehigh Carbon Community College, Easy Deitch, and you'll be able to find the information on how to enroll and sign up for that class. Luella does a great job, so we want to give her a shout out. Also, mark your calendars. A month from, a little bit more from today, on the 19th of March, is the one and only Pennsylvania German Sammerlauf, taking place this year at the Midway Diner there on Route 78. And there will be, I think it starts around 10 o'clock. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it's usually mid-morning until mid to late afternoon. It's free to get in. There is entertainment. There will be speakers, educational opportunities, and just all things Pennsylvania Dutch. Well, we have Wayne Herring, Rachel's dad, joining us from Oviedo, Florida. Holy cow, we're all the way down in the Sunshine State. Thanks for joining us, Wayne. What else did I want to share with you tonight? Oh, yes. For the next couple of months, I will be plugging this really hard on the show. It will soon be a July, and July means one thing for us Pennsylvania Dutch, and that's folk festival time. This year's Kutztown Folk Festival will be taking place the 2nd through the 10th of July, and I'm telling you what, guys, I'm involved in some of the planning for this year's festival. I've been involved in some meetings where I got to hear some inside information about some of the things that the new director is planning on doing with the festival. It is going to be, for my money, I'll bet you, the best festival we've had in a long time. Not to say the previous festivals were bad, not at all, but we got some great stuff coming this year to the Folk Festival, stuff that's never happened before. Some new acts, some new vendors, some new food opportunities. You have to set your calendar and put it in there that you are going to visit the Kutztown Folk Festival at least one day during that run from July 2nd to the 10th. And close to the festival, I'm going to have the director, Heather Zimmerman, back on the show to give you all the to wet your lips about, I can't wait to get to the Folk Festival, all the cool things that are planned for this year. It truly, everybody, I'm not joking, and I'm not trying to hype this up too much. I'm being honest. It's going to be awesome this year. So please mark your calendars, July 2nd through the 10th. And that's all I really have as far as news and upcoming events. I clearly didn't see anything else going on. Later on in the show, we'll talk about some things culturally that are going to be happening here in the next couple of weeks in and around Pennsylvania Dutch country with Fastnacht time and moving in towards Lent and all that. But we'll talk about that later. We got a couple more people joining us. I want to give shout outs to Mo. He's joined us almost every month from Midlothian, Virginia, is back again. Thanks so much for joining us. And Gerald is joining us from Lehigh Acres, Florida. Florida is well represented tonight, guys. That's great. Keep those comments coming. Well, without further ado, our topic tonight is one that I find absolutely fascinating. And to be honest, I didn't know how fascinating it was until I read this book. Our good friend Rachel Yoder recently published the book Pennsylvania Dutch Design, A History of Kitsch, Folk Art, and More. And, when I first picked up the book, I thought to myself, well, I have an understanding of what folk art is, and I have an understanding of I think I know what kitsch is, but after reading this book, my opinion and my views on kitsch, particularly and how it relates to the Pennsylvania Dutch, totally changed. And that's why I was so excited to invite her on so that she can tell this story to all of us. And we have a great conversation. She has tons of images to share with us as well. But I do want to start with this. Being the good teacher that I am, I like to think to my students and say, okay, we're talking about kitsch today. What the heck is kitsch even mean? So I want to share this definition that I came across, and then we'll see if Rachel is going to say that's a good definition or, well, maybe it's a little different than that. But this is the definition I found. Arts, objects, or design considered to be in poor taste because of excessive garishness or sentimentality, but sometimes appreciated in an ironic or knowing way. That's a crazy definition to think about this concept. So we're going to take this concept now. I'm going to bring our good friend Rachel in. Hello, Rachel. Welcome back to PA Dutch Live.
Oh, gooder dog. I'm so excited to be here. How are you, cousin?
I am doing very well. Yes, full disclosure, we are related. However, it's pretty dark. We share like an 8th great grandfather, something along those 7th great grandfather.
Yeah.
So we like to call each other cousin, but we're probably like, I don't know, you got to do the genealogy math. We're like 8th cousins or something, like 7th cousins, something. But cousin nonetheless, right?
Indeed. Don't take it away from me.
You got it. No. So Rachel, before we start looking at some of these images, tell everybody a little bit about what about this topic drew you into saying, this is something I want to research, this is something I want to write about?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It's very funny how I came upon this quest and journey, actually. So I'm a visual artist, full disclosure, and I grew up in Bucks County, as I've mentioned before when I've been a guest of yours. So outside of the Pennsylvania Dutch area and, ground zero for Pennsylvania Dutch. So I always approach things, especially art or design, from a visual frameworks, right? So kitsch in general, I've always been really drawn to kitschy art or lowbrow art or things like this. I've always really been drawn to it. I like the graphic quality of it, the really opaque colors and bright colors in general. So actually how I ended up in this journey was when I was studying at Kutztown University for my MFA in communication design. I started to delve into trying to sort out the difference between some of the things I was seeing that seemed to be not considered authentic Pennsylvania Dutch design and some of the things that I was seeing that was authentic Pennsylvania Dutch and everything in between, which of course includes some of the silk screens that were made, excuse me, doing my makeup in the dark.
That's fine. That's fine.
Some of the silk screens that were created in a very authentic way and in a way to educate people about our people and Pennsylvania Dutch art. So there's a whole, it's really definitely more of a spectrum, as you could say. I personally love kitsch very, very much. I'm very drawn to it aesthetically, speaking specifically about Pennsylvania Dutch kitsch. So what I mean when I say that is the tea towels and the tablecloths that you would see many, many places, sometimes even in your grandparents' home, not always often though, but things like this, you would consider this kitsch. This was clearly made not by hand. I'm not positive of all the processes, but some of them were silk screened, and then some of them were actually done creating a fabric itself. So this is what I mean by kitsch, and in no way am I putting it down, but I wanted to discover what it was all about, basically, because I was studying design at the time, and specifically surface pattern design, which is anything like a fabric, textile, things like this, or the pattern that you put on a pot or you put on a mug or something like that. So
well, can I ask a quick question, Rachel?
Yes.
When you say, why do some people put this type of art down?
Oh, Lordy. Well, with all full disclosure as well, I consider myself a folk artist, and because it can become a mockery or a cheapening of, and you'll hear this a lot now, not even within Pennsylvania Dutch art, you'll find something that looks really cool at Target, but it was clearly not handmade, but often ripped off by somebody on Etsy that's trying to make a living being an actual artist. So I wouldn't say that it's put down, that it doesn't deserve it necessarily. It's tricky because it actually can undermine the livelihood of actual folk artists, I would say, is the best answer for that. But, as a mom and somebody who loves to collect art, sometimes you can't afford the authentic pieces. And sometimes it's nice to have something that reminds you of that. But then there's also this, within this whole whirlwind of discussion, now there's become a nostalgia for this stuff because it reminds you of a time period or maybe a person that had it. And now it's also very connected to a people that you knew, people that had these things in their home. For example, my grandmother had one of these calendars that were printed, and I think of it very differently than maybe somebody would have thought of it then. because it's now connected to her. I'll tell you what, it all started with this. And shout out to Gail Kessler over at Ladyfingers in Ole. My mom bought this fabric in the 90s, maybe 80s. I don't know. It's all a blur because I'm over 40. I'm going to refer to myself as over 40 for the next 20 years. And this tea towel was made by my mom with fabric from Gail Kessler at Ladyfingers. And when I went in 2017 to find this fabric, it no longer was there. And in fact, what I found was none of these fabrics were any longer available, which really perplexed me. And I thought, well, where did they go? They were clearly very popular. And I was curious where they went. So I literally went on a journey with the support of my thesis professors. Big shout out to Kate Claire and Karen Kresge, Vicki Maloney, my sweet, wonderful professors that supported me through this insane journey. And I was trying to find these patterns, and I was trying to find these textiles, and they were nowhere to be found. Produced now, totally gone, wiped out. So I said, what's going on here? So I decided not only did I want to research the past and the history of these patterns, but also I wanted to reinvent them and kind of start the revolution again, because I feel, art should be, especially particularly folk art, should be consumed by the folk. And it's not really fair if they can't afford it. So I do think there's something beautiful to the silk screened hex signs that are available and reproductions of artwork if they're done in an authentic and respectful way. And that's the nuance that's very important, because a lot of these items were not done in that way. And I found, while we find them very humorous and fun and, kind of not kitschy, what's the word I want? Fun to look at, there's sort of a deeper, unfortunately, perpetrating some prejudices against Pennsylvania Dutch people that show up in tea towels and things like that, and especially with the PA Dutch talk.
Yeah, and we have some. You have some great images coming up here in a minute to highlight just that. But I do want to take 1 second, guys out there, if you're watching, let us know. Did you grow up with did your parents or your grandparents have these types of tea towels full of like Pennsylvania Dutch images or other kinds of trinkets around the house? I bet you the answer is probably yes for a lot of you. Maybe some of you still have these things. So let us know in the comment section. And if you have questions, don't be afraid to ask questions for Rachel. She's great at answering questions too. A quick shout out to some people joining us again across the ocean. Hello from Neustadt an der Weinstraße. Christoph, you have a beautiful city. I've been there multiple times. I'd love to be able to sit down with you right now and drink a Schorle, but sadly I can't. Justin's joining us from Philly.
Hey, Justin.
Chris is giving you a shout out, Rachel. Look at this. Rachel runs the best kid arts craft classes during the pandemic. That's wonderful.
Thank you, Chris. My heart's exploding. Thank you so much, Chris. That's so kind. Thank you so much. I love my dinner.
And Chris, a different Chris says, we didn't, but I sure wish we did. Oh, referring to the kitsch stuff. Well, everybody, let's take a look and let's look at some of these things. I'm going to bring Rachel's computer.
Let me say one more.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, you go, Doug. But I was just going to say one more thing. A very important also nuance is when I asked my Pennsylvania Dutch diehard grandmother, did you have these things in your home? Did you go to the folk fest? She said, absolutely not. Why would we buy these things? We were Pennsylvania Dutch. We didn't need to own these things. So that's a really important thing to think about. And what's really fascinating is if you ask them really, really diehard, I'm talking the frugalist of the frugal, they are not going to be buying any tea towels like this. I'll tell you what, unless it was scrap. And I'll tell you, here's another example. These were feed sacks that had Pennsylvania Dutch designs on these. I mean, these are incredible. This would be the only way my grandmother Olive would have had anything like this in her home, unless she got it at the Jake's or the Shakes flea market, right? All right, you go to the images now, Doug. And
all right, let's look at,
I just wanted to comment on the definition of kitsch, which was wonderful, but actually in my book, it says from the dialect German, the word, and I'm going to mess it up because, I don't know it. It's kitchen, to smear, or from the German verb verkitchen, to cheapen, a mispronunciation of the English word sketch or an inversion of the French chic. So that's another kind of way to look at it. It's kind of like a cheapened version, Okay.
So talk about some of these lovely images that you've collected over the time, the course of this research and stuff.
Yes. So also full disclosure, I did self-publish this book because I was working with Arcadia Publishing and they're just amazing, but I just could not fatten it up as much as they needed. And I was just, I wanted the collection to be authentic from the time that I had the journey. So I ended up doing a self-publishing. And as much as I wanted to give credit as I could, some of the pieces I wasn't able to find the credit. So with that being said, I have, this is all from the book. So if you purchase the book, you will be able to also enjoy these wonderful pictures. So this is one of the first pieces that I show. And this is, of course, help me out, Doug, the Dalek.
Täglich gepflegt.
I drive him crazy with my awful husband. So it's the daily duties. So listen, here's the funny thing. So the biggest kitschy thing that you'll see is Amish people participating in things that they would never do, or what we call plain Dutch people. So like literally they would not have hex signs, maybe some Mennonites I have heard, but not Pennsylvania or not actual Amish people. So they have characterized us and made a caricature of us that we are all looking very Amish and that we are doing things that the fancy Dutch, us, the party animals, would be doing. So that's the first thing that will give you the clue that it's kitsch. And again, I'm not saying that I don't like it. I actually really enjoy it, particularly the color schemes. And I love the graphic elements of this. So it's going through the week and telling us all the things that we're going to be doing if we're Pennsylvania Dutch people or Amish in these ways. So who do you think the target audience was? Thinking as a designer, who do you think that they were trying to target with these? Certainly not the real Dutchies, because they must have gone mad out of their minds that they were putting them into these little boxes. What do you think, Doug?
Right. No, my initial reaction would always be tourists.
Yeah, exactly. You got it, sir. And it's interesting because we're going to get into some newspapers.com's clippings. Shout out to Candace Perry, who taught me about newspapers.com. She blew out my research, opened it wide up. It was amazing. And some really far and wide throughout the United States papers that were showing advertisements for these things. Just like if you start to research hex signs and Zook and the reach he had, I mean, my goodness, the whole United States was swept with the Zook mania, honestly. So that's a really good point. So these are the different things that we would be doing. It's on a lovely tea towel. I really enjoy it graphically. But again, we're going to get into more of the underlying prejudice that it was perpetrating. Of course, my girl here. It gives me trouble. This is a sample from another tea towel. And it's just, you can see this caricature, which actually a similar caricature really inspired when we were working on Penny Olive. The grandmother drawing. So I really enjoy the illustrative quality of these images. Illustrative. Here's another classic that many of you probably have seen or own. Pennsylvania Dutch cooking. Of course, we see some very Amish looking friends, perhaps Mennonites, but again, trying to promote this idea that we're all very, very plain and simple people, which is not very true at all. We come in all different colors and different. We're all okay. Doug, help me out.
No, you're right. I mean, one of the things that is always one of the things that is always
flavors. My bad.
Yeah.
I should use flavors.
No, but I mean, I think it was easy. It was easy for the people producing this stuff probably to take an image of the Amish. The image of an Amish person was something that no matter where you were from, most likely you had that understanding. But most people, but most people didn't have that understanding of like our great grandparents who drove cars, who had electricity in their farmhouses, that were still working the land, but didn't dress this way, but yet still made all these recipes that were in this cookbook, or followed some of the traditional practices of like the daily routines. Well, Monday was your day you did laundry, Tuesday you did this, Wednesday you did that. But I think again it goes back to this idea. It's easier to sell something if you have recognizable images there.
Right.
So
right. And that's very true. And you'll see that these caricatures show up often, like they're the same person, basically just being recycled. And the other thing to notate is that traditional Amish people and most Mennonites would never decorate and have these decorative elements in their homes because they would see it as vanity. So that's something really important. So it's also a disrespect to their beliefs and the way that they live as well. So here's another one that many of us have probably seen. This is 1956, the boom of tourism in the United States. It's wonderful. And of course, Zook was happening, not quite yet, but around this time, all of this tourism boom was happening. So it was a big seller to invite people to this area. And it's funny because they would kind of throw them into the Lancaster area, which is not very, you wouldn't see hex signs there, and they'd be having all these hex signs. It's really very, very interesting. Of course, at the same time, we're dealing with the Folk Fest has started, and they're trying to promote authentic folk life at the time and really making these great initiatives. So these two things are happening at the same time, which author Anne Harp talks about a lot because she was very offended by these kitschy items. And it's really fascinating to hear how she talks about it. How's this? So this is a set of tea towels. Again, I talked about the one that my mom made from Ladyfingers. And I mean to say, again, it's not negative. The reason I would classify this as kitsch is because the woman that appears on this tea towel is more of a Swiss origin, not really authentically Pennsylvania Dutch. So that would categorize it. Otherwise, there's a lot of very authentic hex signs, and I find that a lot less offensive as far as the Dutch talk. This is sort of going down the line. Like the third one is much more offensive than the other two. So here we go with the pie is all, but the cake is yet. Yeah, of course we talk in this way, but what was the actual reason for promoting this? Was it being in on the joke, or was it making a joke? So that's sort of my axe to grind.
Yeah, and it's such a crazy concept to think about, because now, like you said earlier, now we're dealing with the concept of nostalgia coming back. And we have like our generation and even the generation before us, see stuff like this and read those phrases, and it takes them back to maybe, their grandparents' farmhouse, and they remember their grandpa talking that way. And even though, and it's that's one thing that I kind of struggled with, not struggled with, but something I really thought a lot about when I was reading your book, is that when you take an instant like this, where you have Dutchified English, and a lot of times it's way over the top, and sometimes the phrases might be actual phrases that people have said, but sometimes also I think they were, played up a little bit more than what they actually were as well. And I think to myself, should I be offended at this? Is this my culture being like mocked, in a certain way, or is there this sense of, it's this quaint idea that, this old culture that people think we're losing, and all it's really a difficult concept to kind of wrap your head around from someone from inside the culture, particularly.
Right.
I think it's much easier for somebody outside the culture to, look at this stuff and oh yeah, okay, whatever. But when you're inside the culture and you see it's trying to hold a mirror up to you, it's a little difficult, I think, to a certain extent. At least I've thought about it a lot recently since reading your book.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing, because it's all within context and who you are as a person. Like my grandmother Olive, who I spoke of, was really berated for her accent. So she was treated, and I've heard stories, many stories, vending events and things like that, of people in a certain generation that were absolutely horrifically treated for their accent and for speaking Pennsylvania Dutch in schools. Right. And with that context is where I'm approaching it from, as saying to people that are seeing it as nostalgic, like, hey, I'm not putting this down. Like, you have your own feelings. I love everybody, Doug, but just take a second to inform yourself about, some of these products and what the purpose was and who was making the money. It certainly wasn't going always to Pennsylvania people,
Right,
I mean, Your Craft was one of the most widespread of the companies that were perpetrating these like sort of dumb Dutchman ideas. And one of their illustrators said something really turned me off, and I put it in the book because it just felt very exploitative. And I feel, it's like an appropriation and an exploitation of people that had already suffered so much. So it's just, it's painful for me, but that's coming from my perspective because of my family's past. Everybody has their own thing. And listen, I find it very attractive too. It's very difficult. And I agree with you. It's kind of one of these things, it's so much gray area. It's not black and white. You can't like hate it and you can't love it. It's kind of one of these things that you hate to love, like I said in the book. Sorry, I went past that really fast. This is also a motif that shows up on redware, and this is a great one to compare with why would this be considered kitsch, because it's super graphic. The redware plate has much more gestural drawing or line work, and it's much more like a freedom, and you can tell it's handmade. All the fancy art words. I love this one, of course. I think Hunter owns this, my husband, because of course it features one of my favorite motifs. So this I actually consider more of the more authentic but replicated items. So this was a silk screen. I think it was a tea towel. But there's the mermaid. And it gives kind of an idea. And this was sort of Zook aligned with giving ideas of what the reason was for using these motifs, which was really cool. I like that one. So here's the one I was mentioning. This is actually the redware piece. And you can just see the difference. I mean, just the line work. And Candace is the curator at the Schwenkfelder. I've been obsessed with Fractor for years, and I love the gestural aspect of it. And it's always one of a kind. It's so unique, and there's like this ancestral spirit to it, which you won't really find in the kitschy stuff, but it gives you a different feeling. It's just different. These are some drawings that are actually from my favorite Pennsylvania Dutch scholar and author, Frances Lichten. If you're interested in learning more about authentic Pennsylvania Dutch designs, she has some books out. She's passed now. She's also from mid-century, but she has some wonderful workbooks out that can actually teach you about these motifs and where they came from. And she makes it sort of like a way to learn more about it. But Doug, you just stop me if I'm going too fast or there's anything else.
No, it looks great. And if anybody out there has questions, pop them in the chat bar.
Let us know.
We'll answer. Absolutely.
So then in the book, I kind of dive into the difference between folk art and kitsch and how you can kind of compare them before getting into the history of Pennsylvania Dutch people and sort of going into some of the prejudices that we were up against, which includes very painfully Benjamin Franklin and his views on Pennsylvania Dutch people, which is very hard to, as a young person, you know, this was one of our heroes. And then to hear the way he felt about our people, it was just very, very difficult to sort of navigate. And then of course my children are growing up now and learning all about him and very excited. And it's just, it's so interesting to kind of work backwards, not learn the history first, but go through with the visual lens to kind of make the path through the aesthetic. It's very, very interesting. But yeah, that was a hard pill to swallow, especially because, you know, he was English and I'm partly English and Welsh, and, you know, there was a lot of stuff going on, right, Doug?
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Here we go. This is a good one. So this is like 50s, 70s. So the kitsch era was primarily between the 30s and the 80s. That's a huge time span, right? Yeah. But really, really the height of it was during the tourism boom. And really, it seems like the 60s, it was really, really popular. They were making umbrellas and all kinds of stuff. I just find it really interesting. So here's a little blurb from my book. And this is, again, distinguishing between Pennsylvania Dutch folk designs and Pennsylvania kitsch designs. So it's just a little bit of an aesthetic way to compartmentalize what the difference is. So this is really important because anybody that's gone through art school or whatever, you learn about how to analyze design. And this is really important in thinking about this and also within the historical context. Of course, not all folk art is going to be authentic 100% and be speaking for everybody, but, you know, am I going the wrong way, Doug?
There we go. There we go.
So I apologize. I am getting over COVID and I'm just lalaloopsy over here. My brain is just topsy-turvy, so I apologize. That's why I've got all the rouge on tonight. So this is one of my favorite pieces, and Candace will kill me if I don't say, I believe it's from our Schwenkfelder collection, because sometimes when you find things online, you don't always get the right source, but this is one of my favorites. And again, we're talking about, you can see that this is watercolor. You can see the gestural strokes. There's some like ink blotches. Like, I am obsessed with this art. I love Fractor art. So this is something that I would consider original folk art. Now,
Rachel, we have a quick question here, and I don't know. Well, I'll ask it, and if you can't answer it, that's fine. Chris Murphy wants to know, how does Pennsylvania Dutch folk art or art compare to regular standard German folk art?
Oh my glory. Chris, you stumped me. You know, I have to be honest with you. In our household, we've got like two schools of thought. I'm like, dude, we've been here 300 years. I'm Pennsylvania Dutch. I don't really relate. And I'm so sorry to all my German loves. I'm sorry, my friends.
No, that's fine.
I don't really feel a strong connection. I haven't really delved into that, Chris. I'm sorry to say. I can say, though, how I know how our Pennsylvania Dutch folk art connects to, like the rosette, of course, is over in Europe and is seen a lot. But as far as German folk art, I really can't tell you, to be honest, Chris.
Well,
That should
I
be
mean,
my next book. You
I'm
tell.
not an expert by any stretch of the imagination when it comes to art or folk art. However, I can say this, Chris, that there are some of the motifs that we have in our Pennsylvania Dutch folk art, of course, were motifs that our immigrant forefathers and foremothers brought with them
Yes.
across the ocean to America. It's not like we got here and all of a sudden we created all our own new symbols and motifs. So some of them are, images and ideas that we brought with us here to North America. And if you travel to parts of Germany, particularly the area of Germany where we are, where the Pennsylvania Dutch, originate from, the Rhine Valley, the Palatinate, into Baden-Württemberg, Hessen, into parts of Switzerland and extreme eastern France, you will see some of these same motifs carved into the side of buildings or in old churches. Rachel mentioned the rosettes. That is, I mean, you'll see that a lot of places. So, I mean, some of these, of course, we continue to develop here once we got here. But I think DNA wise, a lot of our folk art, and again, this is just me speaking, and if anybody's out there knows for sure, they can absolutely correct me. But a lot of the DNA or the structural DNA, the foundation of our motifs really was stuff that we brought with, and then we built upon that once we were here over, as we continue to evolve and grow as a culture here in America. Because as Rachel said, we've been here since the late 1600s. So we've had almost, 3+ centuries to develop and grow and be affected by our English neighbors and by our Scotch Irish neighbors and Native American neighbors in our early history. So I think a lot of that, partly does, have change, why some of our motifs now are not found in modern, German folk art, for example. I hope that
Yeah,
helps,
I guess.
Chris, a little bit.
Thanks, Doug, because duh. Of course. And Candace and I talk about this all the time because a lot of the Frockter that we have at the Schwenkfelder was made here in America, but it wasn't necessarily like just developed here and come out of thin air. But yeah, I guess I thought he was asking sort of like what the contemporary folk art was in the last 100 years in Germany, because I'm so far removed. That's why, Doug, we've got to plan a vacation and just go
Yeah.
and like, all the things.
Yeah, I can't speak at all about the modern folk art movement in Germany. The other thing also to keep in mind, Chris, is that Germany is such a diverse country, and we talk about the area that we're from. If you travel 50, 75 miles in any direction, you are entering into other regions of Germany that are culturally different. And therefore their motifs and their art's going to look different from the art of the Rhineland. If you travel to Eastern Germany, like in Saxony and going up towards into the north, you're going to see different images, different motifs as well, because culturally they're different. The languages is different. Food culture is different. So we always have to keep that kind of in mind too. And we can't just say Germany. We have to think about Germany as a big map of different groups of culturally, they're all Germans, but there are differences between Bavarians and Swabians, and there's really big differences between a Swabian and a Saxon or a lower Saxon or somebody from like Schleswig-Holstein way up north going towards Denmark. There's cultural differences, there's food differences, linguistic differences. So we also have to kind of keep that in mind too. So the art's going to be different as well. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Hey, real quick,
sure.
we got another question.
Yeah.
Hunter wants to know, do the Amish paint hex signs on their white barns? Again, most of us that are Pennsylvania Dutch, we already know the answer to that question. But for people that are joining us that maybe aren't, that are not Pennsylvania Dutch or trying to connect with our culture or their culture, yeah, the Amish, the plain people do not decorate their barns. It has a lot to do with their cultural beliefs and religious beliefs in showing, outward signs of being you mentioned it earlier, Rachel, and the words are vanity. Exactly.
Yeah.
The hex signs that we find in southeastern Pennsylvania are found on non-plain Pennsylvania Dutch barns. So, and again, that has to do cultural differences between the subgroups under the umbrella of the Pennsylvania Dutch.
I love how with Pennsylvania Dutch people, like the church people are the party animals, the fancy ones. It makes me crack up. I love it. So, this is really interesting because this is a deer. I'm such a huge fan of John Yachts. A friend of ours, Mervyn Smith, comes often to our booth at the Folk Fest, and he brought these one time. And Johnny Ott, of course, was an insanely, profoundly influential hex sign painter and so incredibly talented. He even made some wild like abstract art, which is very, very cool. But here he is, kind of, dipping into this idea that people want. I mean, he was at the Folk Fest. People wanted Amish people portrayed on hex signs and in products, but of course this is hand painted. So this is one of these like gray areas, like where how do we feel about this,
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. Here's another piece of his, just an incredible artist and such a character. I wish I could have met him. He was very fun. But here's your craft, of course. Really, I said, again, a huge purveyor of this Dutch talk, and sort of where you're really skirting the line of like, okay, I'm feeling very uncomfortable with this, being as, like I mentioned, my family members and many, many stories of young people being hit, or I heard one story, I don't know if it was you, Doug, a grandfather had been punched in the mouth for speaking French. I don't know, man. I don't know.
My maternal grandfather was hit by his teacher in the one-room schoolhouse for speaking Pennsylvania Dutch at recess. Yeah.
That's really incredibly insane as an educator in this day and age with ESL and the support that we have. And thank God it's like that now. But like, I wonder if there had been that kind of support then, what would our story look like now? Would we be longing so much? I can't. I'm sorry. I went there. It's such a dark place. I'm so sorry.
No, it's not a dark place at all. That is a beautiful philosophical question to think about. Had the land, and this is kind of off topic, but at the same time, I mean, these are things we talk about on this show.
Yes.
If the world wars hadn't happened, or if the world wars were fought with a different country other than Germany, how would that have changed the direction of the Pennsylvania Dutch language among non-plain Pennsylvania Dutch? Or the fact that one-room schoolhouses, the school teachers weren't in some cases physically beating the Dutch out of us. Where would we be today? It's a great thing. It's one of those front porch in the summer conversations to kind of like dream how different might our culture look today? How what would its presence be? It's really interesting. But, that kind of speaks then to this art, because in some ways, this folk art, as kitschy as it might have been, it did in some way support our language a little bit, in the sense that it put the language out there.
Mm-hmm.
It used phrases in Pennsylvania Dutch that, normally you wouldn't have seen written down, for example. So in that way, there was a kind of a good thing about it. I mean, spellings probably were, not the best, and maybe there were mistakes made in the language that were being put on these tea towels and things like this, tablecloths. But at least it was putting the language out there, and that's a whole nother discussion. Not being accurate, or what's that do? So, but anyway, go ahead, Rachel.
Well, that's so funny that you mentioned that, because my dearest, my favorite, sorry, Hunter, my favorite hex sign painter, Ivan Hoyt, says of his decision to do the silk screened images, which you can still find a lot of Ivan Hoyt's in great rotation, was because he is an art teacher as well. I don't know if you knew that, Doug. He's a retired art teacher, but he wanted to educate people, about the Pennsylvania Dutch and Pennsylvania Dutch folk art, especially authentic Pennsylvania Dutch folk art. Now, if you speak to people that have been doing the Folk Fest for years, they will tell you of a time where it took a rough turn around the 80s, where there was a lot of kitschy stuff. And they're not just talking Pennsylvania Dutch kitschy stuff. We're not talking about the tea towels and stuff like that. We're talking about like cheapy stuff that they were very unhappy about. You hear about it a lot. And there was sort of this push and pull between, like you're mentioning, this rise, and maybe people came out to the Folk Fest and supported these artists more because there was this conversation in America with these different products that were available. This one's from the cover. This is one of my favorites. And maybe that helped support them, but then it became like sort of like, this thorn in your side. So it's really interesting. And I really never got an answer about where it went and why it died out, but just that, trends change and they come back around them. It's just the nature of it.
I love the description on that last piece.
Yeah, let's read it.
Country Junior treks to colorful Pennsylvania Dutch country for the design of this gay young cotton. It's an authentic as a hex sign.
Yes. But which hex sign, my friend? Which one?
Well, hey, it doesn't matter, right? It's as authentic as a hex sign.
But look at these again, Candace Perry, big shout out to Candace Perry. These are from newspapers.com, and they just blew my research open, because as she mentioned to me when I went to her, Candace, I need some help with this research. There's not really been a lot written about this. I don't believe there was anything written about it except maybe some articles in Pennsylvania Dutch folk life and things like that. But it's incredible. A lot of the research was based on interviews and also just visual research, like we're seeing here. This is a skirt from that era, and I actually bought this from Etsy for a lot of money, and I made some pillows out of it. So. But yeah,
see now here's where I'm torn again. Like, put that image back up a minute, Rachel.
Yeah.
The skirt. I look at that, and there's a part of me that says, I really want my daughter to wear that to school, so that somebody can be like, what is all that? And then she can like turn them and have that educational moment and say, well, these are, this motif here, blah, blah, blah.
And our beautiful Estella would certainly school them. And I love that. And that was actually the inspiration, Doug, to create Nix Nooks, the line that ended up being my thesis project. The idea was to create this revolution where we're bringing back inexpensive reproductions of beautiful folk art motifs, but in an authentic and a responsible way that was not perpetrating these prejudices. So that was kind of the idea. Of course, it fizzled out because it's quite expensive to produce things like that. But yeah, that's the idea is, there's nothing wrong with reproductions, in my opinion. We can go at it, in fact, people at the Folk Fest, friends of mine can go back and forth about how they feel about it and how I feel about it. But I've always been one that believes that folk art should be accessible for everybody. And, you have to, you have to have the balance. The artist needs to be able to make some money on the product and then the customer needs to be able to afford it. So there's, again, Ivan Hoyt and I really align on this in that he felt it was important for people to be able to access this art as well. So,
Rachel, I have this is a really great question for you to think about from our good friend Adam Kissinger. He says,
hey,
Rachel,
Adam.
Do you think Keith Haring was influenced by Pennsylvania Dutch folk art?
Oh my gosh, stop. We just have to stop all of this because I just love him so much. I love Keith Haring so much. Oh, that's such a great question. Oh my gosh. I mean, I should know the answer based on all of my education, but I don't. I can't imagine. Of course, Hunter grew up in the same area. They both went to Kutztown High School. I cannot imagine he wasn't influenced. Absolutely, Adam, I believe for sure, especially in the era that he was in, the 80s. Yeah. He's coming out of the 60s, 70s, this era where all this was happening. Absolutely, I would say. Maybe not with his motifs, perhaps, but definitely with his graphic design. Or maybe he was pushing completely against it. Who knows? I mean, I should know this. What do you think, Doug?
I can't answer. And for those of you out there that aren't familiar with who Keith Haring is, please Google him. I did a video on my YouTube channel about him because he's a son of the Pennsylvania Dutch. Grew up in Kutztown. His parents and his grandparents could speak the dialect, could speak our language. So I'm sure. I mean, I never met him, of course, but I would think that, like Rachel said, given where he grew up, the time that he grew up, and being growing up in a Pennsylvania Dutch family, he would have been exposed to our folk art for sure, and whether that has to have some influence on you, either positive or negatively.
Sure.
So well, Hunter says definitely. That's his answer. Definitely. And I would tend to lean that way too. Sadly, we lost him. We lost him way too young. It would be awesome if he could, still be with us creating art and, what he might have done in his later years or, but we think about the lively colors that he used in a lot of his art. And again, those are colors that you see, vibrant colors in a lot of our Pennsylvania Dutch folk art. So maybe that was one part of inspiration. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. And, he was such a natural educator too. So I just adore him so much. He really did profound things for, the crack crisis that was happening, crack is whack and all that. He was really a profound inspiration. If you don't know him, you have to check him out, Keith Haring. And he's from Kutztown, Pennsylvania. And there's some really great documentaries about him too. And a children's book by his sister. I think her name's Kay, and it's lovely. I love it. Now let's check this out. Great question, by the way, Adam. And Rad Scrapple is so amazing. Look at this. We've got historic up in the left-hand side. Like, what is this, Davy? What is his name?
Daniel Boone, probably. Well, maybe Davy Crockett. They were probably referencing Daniel Boone.
Maybe it's Daniel Boone. I'll give you that one. But then we got the scenic and we have the pagoda. It's like so strange. Like, I know it's very important to us locals, but imagine somebody from, like, I don't know, Illinois, like seeing this. They're like, what's going on here? And then we have the festivals, which is good. And yeah, of course we have good food. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Where's the sauerkraut though?
Yeah, I don't see it. No.
How dare they? But I actually really enjoy this cover. And another place to check out is Ursinus College has a wonderful digital collection of folk life, and they're all digitized. And oh my gosh, these old, they're just these old news. What do you call them, Doug? Like not a magazine. I don't know what to call them. The Pennsylvania Dutch Folk Life. I guess magazine. They have a collection of wonderful stories by an array of authors and amazing illustrations. And there's some really wonderful articles in there. I definitely highly recommend check it out on our Sinus. Here's a map of Lancaster County with Pennsylvania Dutch and historic interests. This is a little hard to see, but it's also in the book. You can Google a lot of this stuff, but it's really fascinating because, as many of us Pennsylvanians know, Lancaster's really, it's more of a touristy place that people go to kind of gawk and, stare at Pennsylvania.
Experience the Amish. Experience the Amish.
But it's always kind of like, ugh. It gives me a little bit of the willies, because it feels really yucky. I don't know. It feels yucky to me. I feel bad. I mean, if people want their privacy, but maybe it's part of their life now. Who knows how they feel? I don't really know Minneapolis, so sorry. Anyway, as bad as I should be practicing with them, my Dutch, I don't do it.
Well, Rachel, do you have like one last image you'd like to really highlight before we wrap things up here? Because I know you got tons.
Oh, look at that. Well, okay, so this is about what I said was my sort of purpose at the end of my journey, discovering that these patterns weren't available anymore. So I decided to create a collection of authentic patterns made from mostly lino cuts. So there was a handmade element, and this was sort of what I envisioned bringing these things back. So they're actually available at Spoonflower. They're a little pricey because they're hand printed in North Carolina. It's a really cool process, but they are available, and you can actually make your own. You can make your own Pennsylvania Dutch folk art and then create fabric with it and create your own tea towels. They have all kinds of different fabrics you can create. It's really an incredible company and process. It's really a lot of fun. So make some kitsch, but authentic, exciting, and purposeful kitsch.
Jeff Marks says here, my premise is to create artwork depicting everyday life of the Pennsylvania Dutch. And that's a great goal, Jeff. Please keep us posted. And as you create stuff, we want to see it. We absolutely want to see
Jeff's
it.
work is amazing. I'm friends with him, and his work is incredible. I really enjoy it, especially because, oh my goodness, it is hard to do realism, and he is top-notch work.
Well, there we go.
Great.
Awesome.
This little guy is so cute.
Yeah, it is. All right, Rachel, what a wonderful conversation. I'm going to remove this a minute. People, I'm telling you, get the book. It's a fascinating read with tons of images in there that Rachel didn't have time to share with us tonight. And as is always the case, I've posted a link to Rachel's website down below in the show notes below. That'll be archived. You can get the book there. You can buy some of her art there. You can also get linked to her husband's art as well. That's for sale. And he does great stuff too. So carrying these traditions of our folk art to the next generation and for generations to come. Rachel, it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We'll have you back on again. Don't worry. And when all of you get out to the folk festival in July, you can visit. You have to visit their stands. Rachel and her husband Hunter's stands are always right next to each other. And you tell them that you watched this show and you'll probably get a free hug. Well, maybe not a free hug, but at least, hey, it's great to meet you.
That's so funny. I have a hugger.
Every time I stop there, I get a free hug. So I have to be careful. Every time I stop, I get a free hug. I don't know if everybody gets a free hug, but I always get a free hug when I stop by.
Great job, Doug.
All right, Rachel. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. It was such always a pleasure talking with you. And tonight was so great to share all of this hard work that you've done over the last couple of years to make this huge project come to life, and then to get it into a format that's easily accessible to anybody out there. So I'll have the link in the show notes, everybody, to get your own copy of the book. And please check out Rachel's website and support her in her endeavors of continuing and perpetuating our Pennsylvania Dutch folk art. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Doug. Max gut.
Max gut. Nah, people, how wonderful was that? I mean, seriously. And it's, we had some kind of deep conversation there about a lot of different things. Some stuff for you to think about and chew on between now and next month, for sure. For sure. Real quick, there is the book, Pennsylvania Dutch Design, A History of Kitsch, Folkart, and More. And you can check that out in the show notes, of course, and get your own. But it's time, real quick. I always like to give a little bit of language stuff for you. We're in February. That means a lot of things for us, Pennsylvania Dutch. Groundhog Day, of course, is in February. And most years, the calendar also brings the time for Fastnachtszeit, when we're eating our donuts and all that good stuff. So I tried to pick a couple of Pennsylvania Dutch words to teach with you guys, or to say with you guys tonight, that highlight words that you could use in the month of February. So there on the left-hand side, of course, is the English. On the right, and of course, we also have Valentine's Day. Here are some Pennsylvania Dutch words for us to look at tonight and just practice as we go along. I'll say them. You guys can say them along with me. Here we go. February in Pennsylvania Dutch is Hunning. Hunning. And that's kind of a cool story. In standard German, it's not Hunning. What I've always read and have been told why we call it Hunning is because February is the month when the deer lose their antlers. And hunning comes from the word for horns. So that's one reason that I've heard why we call it hunning. The holiday we just had on Monday, Valentine's Day, da Veldi. Love as a noun is die lieb, and the verb is liebe. So if you wanted to say to somebody, I love you, which I hope all of you go out and say that to somebody tonight, and say it in Pennsylvania Dutch, ich lieb dich. Ich lieb dich. The word for a heart is es hat's. Es hat's. Maybe you bought your special someone chocolate. That is die Schokolade. Die Schokolade. Flowers, die Blume. Die Blume. A card, die Kort. Die Kort. Now, what's coming up here in 2 weeks is Shrove or Fat Tuesday, which in Pennsylvania Dutch we call die Fastnacht. Now, this is a word that you see spelled a couple different ways. Some people pronounce it Fastnacht. Some people say Fastnacht. So you sometimes see it with an H in the middle. Sometimes you see it with a T in the middle. There's no right or wrong spelling. This is the one that I'm used to using, so that's what I went with. But no matter what, if you say that word, no matter how you pronounce it, most people are going to know exactly what you're talking about. And the day after Shrove Tuesday or Fat Tuesday is Ash Wednesday, which in Pennsylvania Dutch is Esche Mittwoch. Esche Mittwoch. Now, make sure on Fat Tuesday, the tradition for us Pennsylvania Dutch is to eat our Fastnachts, these little donuts that we make, potato-based donuts. They are absolutely delicious. Just absolutely delicious, period. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, this is the month with the groundhog. So the word for groundhog, die Grundsau. Die Grundsau. Shadow, da Schade. And this year, Punxsutawney Phil, if you're going to use him as our example, he did see his shadow and he ran back in his hole. So that meant 6 more weeks of winter. Da winter is the word for winter. And then finally, spring, which will be here soon. Don't worry, everybody, is es Frühjahr. Es Frühjahr. So there is some Pennsylvania Dutch for you. And every month, I also like to share some music. Big announcement. Our good friend Dave Kline, if you're anywhere near the Berks County region, you'll know him. He is a active musician and promoter of all things Pennsylvania Dutch. He and I have been working on some new music, some new songs, particularly for the folk festival this year, but with the hopes of maybe putting out just some new Pennsylvania Dutch music. So we want to share with all of you one of our brand new songs. It's not really a brand new song. There's this traditional Appalachian song called Old Groundhog. And when you hear it, it has kind of that bluegrass sound to it. Well, Dave and I took that song and we made a bilingual version of it. So what we're going to hear today is we're going to hear the English. Dave's going to be singing the English. I'm going to be singing the Pennsylvania Dutch, and we got some great instrumentation going on. So give me a second to pull that video up. We've been really excited about doing this because not too many people have heard this yet, and we're really excited to be sharing this new music with you all. So hopefully this will work. This is Old Groundhog, or as we say in Pennsylvania Dutch, Al Grundsau, by Dave Kline and myself. Enjoy, everybody.
Shoulder up a gun and pick up a dog. Shoulder up a gun and pick up a dog. 'Cause we're off to the woods for to hunt a groundhog. Old groundhog.
Schulter thy Flint und nimm thy Hund. Schulter thy Flint und nimm thy Hund. Begin in the bush and Grundsau to Yoder. Alt Grundsau.
Come on, boys, let's pull him on out. Come on, boys, let's pull him on out. Good God Almighty in the groundhog stout. Old groundhog.
Kummer Bube, Robbie mal raus. Kummer Bube, Robbie mal raus. My God, ist stark und dick. Alt Grundsau.
Come on, boys, let's work and tear. Come on, boys, let's work and tear. 'Cause the meat'll do the eats and the hide'll do the wear. Old groundhog.
Kummer Bube, schaffe und reiße. Kummer Bube, schaffe und reiße. Esse mir das Fleisch und wehre mir die Haut. Alt Grundsau.
Skin him out and tan his hide. Skin him out and tan his hide. Best darn shoestrings I ever tied. Old groundhog.
Zieh ihn ab und kopp ihm ab. Zieh ihn ab und kopp ihm ab. Best Shoe Battle, den ich gestern hab. Alt Grundsau.
I like my groundhog steamed and fried. Like my groundhog steamed and fried with a little piece of bacon by the side. Old groundhog.
Gleich mein Grundsack gedampft und gebroddert. Gleich mein Grundsack gedampft und gebroddert. Kleine Stück Speck auf die Side. Alt Grundsau.
Here comes Sally with a snicker and a grin. Here comes Sally with a snicker and a grin. Got a groundhog grease running down her chin. Old groundhog.
Da kommt die Sally mit dem Grins und dem Schmunzle. Da kommt die Sally mit dem Grins und dem Schmunzle. Hat Grundsau Schmutz auf ihr Kinn. Alt Grundsau.
There's meat in the cupboard and a butter in the churn. Meat in the cupboard and the butter's in the churn. If that ain't groundhog, I'll be darned. Old groundhog.
Fleisch in dem Schrank und Butter in dem Fass. Fleisch in dem Schrank und Butter in dem Fass. What's der Grundsau? H.R.E.S. ist Alt Grundsau.
Look at them people, they're about to fall. Look at them people, they're about to fall. Don't hate till the breech won't put up at all. Old groundhog.
Guck mal auf die Leute, die wäre Falle. Guck mal auf die Leute, die wäre Falle. Hätt so dicke Fresse, ihr Hosser geht nicht zu. Alt Grundsau.
Old groundhog.
Alt Grundsau.
Old groundhog.
Well, what do you think of that, fine people? It's been so much fun working with Dave. He's so much fun to work with, and we are really pushing the boundaries on what Pennsylvania Dutch music is in 2022. We have a couple other songs that we're working on. We have some already that are fully recorded, and I'll share those with you guys, of course, in the future, because we love to share this stuff. A couple last things before I say goodbye. Adam, thanks so much for this, but it's true, everybody. If you're watching this, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, because that'll help. The more people that subscribe, the more ways we have of getting our message out. And that kind of talks here to what Jeff says. Thanks so much for this nice comment too, Jeff. Great episode, Rachel and Doug. Thanks for this podcast. We need more of this to dispel a lot of the mythology and to tell the truth. Well, Jeff, we're going to try. We are absolutely going to try. That's for sure. We're going to keep the show coming as long as we can. And of course, that kind of leads me up. You can mark your calendars. Oh, hold on. If you like what we're doing here, and I hope that you do, if you like what we're doing here, you can financially support the channel by buying me a coffee at that website right there, buymeacoffee.com/Doug Madenford. And all the money that's raised goes towards the upkeep of the channel, helps pay for things like microphones and lights, and helps pay the internet bill and all those types of things so that we can keep good content coming to you every week, month after month. Speaking of which, get ready, because our next episode is already scheduled. Mark your calendars. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be a good one. March the 16th. It's another Wednesday night at 6 p.m. And this time I'm inviting on a good friend of mine and Rachel's, Ben Rader. Ben Rader, if you're not familiar with, he's an artist and a musician. And when you want to talk about pushing the boundaries of what Pennsylvania Dutch is today, he is the poster child for that. I can't wait to have him on the show. We're going to take a look at some of his art, which is breathtakingly beautiful. And we're going to listen to some of his music, which is awesome. Like genres and types of music that you just never would think would go with Pennsylvania Dutch. Ben Rader puts them together. And he's going to be on the show. I can't wait to have him on. So please mark your calendars. March 16th, 2022 at 6 p.m. We'll be right back here for another episode of Pennsylvania Dutch Live. In the meantime, please, people, keep practicing your Pennsylvania Dutch. Visit Rachel's website, order her book, buy some of her art, buy some of her husband Hunter's art as well. And I look forward to being with all of you next month. Until next time, you know what I always say, keep practicing your Pennsylvania Dutch. Tell everybody about the good things we're doing here. And, you know, Max gut.
Ich kann deutsche Worte singen, hoff so kannst du. Welle dann mit Anna singen, sing ich und du. Ich bin froh und ich bin herrlich, wie bist dann du? Ich geh recklen auf die Karte, ich hoff so tust du. Oh, wir singen, sing ich und du. Oh, mir platsche dazu. Viel wie ein Hutschli im Feld, wie viel stand du? Gib dem Doktor gar kein Geld, was gibst dann du? Rumfungiere du, ich nicht, hoff nicht tust du. Ich geh zeitlich noch im Bett, hoff so tust du. Oh, mir singen, sing ich und du. Oh, mir platsche